They say power reveals character. And when Karen from the HOA knocked on our door, she had no idea who she was messing with. It started on a calm Saturday morning. My wife Emily was in the kitchen baking cinnamon rolls, the aroma swirling through our home. I was on the porch enjoying a rare, peaceful moment with my coffee, when the first knock came sharp, impatient, and insistent. Not because we were ignoring anyone anyonely had flour on her hands, and I assumed it was a delivery. The second knock came louder, almost aggressive. Then a third, paired with the unmistakable screech of Karen's voice. "I know you're in there. This is community business." See, Karen was the self-appointed queen of our HOA, the kind of woman who measured grass height with a ruler, documented porch decorations with time-stamped photos, and once fined a neighbor for having a non-regulation shade of beige on their window trim. Emily rolled her eyes, wiped her hands, and looked at me. "She can wait," she said calmly. "I'm not playing her game today." We carried on, but Karen didn't single quotes, but apparently not answering your front door in broad daylight was now suspicious activity. 15 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up to our driveway. I opened the door just in time to hear her shouting. She refused to answer the door. "That's suspicious behavior and possibly hostile. I demand you investigate." The officers stepped forward, calm but alert, one of them already reaching for his notepad. Before I could speak, a voice cut through the noise. "Karen." Everyone turned. Emily stepped out of the house in her casual jeans and tee, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. But now, the younger officer's eyes widened. "Chief Maddox," he said, stunned. Karen froze, her face drained of color. "Wait, Chief." Emily smiled, not smug, not angry, just steady. "Yes," she said, showing her badge. Emily Maddox, newly appointed Chief of Police. "I was baking." "What's the emergency?" Karen stammered. "I shoe your grass was over 3 inches last week, and you ignored my citations, and now you've refused community outreach." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You called 911 because someone didn't answer the door. That's a misuse of emergency services. You realize that, right?" The officers shifted, awkward now. One of them spoke. "Ma'am, we'll need to ask you some questions." About this call, Karen turned beet red. But, she didn't say anything. She ignored me. Emily turned to her. "I wasn't ignoring you, Karen. I was ignoring nonsense. There's a difference." Word spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. The HOA queen had tried to intimidate the new police chief, and got caught weaponizing 911 in the process. And that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Karen's paper, citations, gone. Her weekly HOA memos, rewritten now with actual legal review, and the best part, a new clause was added to the HOA bylaws. Any misuse of authority within the neighborhood shall be subject to formal review. Guess who was the first one up for it? Yep, Karen. It turned out she'd been fining people without official HOA approval, holding private meetings, even using HOA funds to pay for surveillance cameras pointed directly at her neighbors. Houses.Emily didn't come in swinging. She let the facts speak for themselves. She formed a neutral committee to investigate, ensured proper procedure, and within 2 months, Karen was stripped of all power. She wasn't banned, Emily, didn't believe in that, but she was asked to take a long unpaid leave from her position. And suddenly, our neighborhood felt lighter, happier. People started planting flowers again. Kids played freely on sidewalks without noise complaints. The community started acting like, well, a community again. As for Emily, she gained instant respect, not because of her badge, but because of her patience, wisdom, and quiet strength. Karen had tried to use fear to control the neighborhood, but Emily showed everyone what real authority looks like. Calm, fair, and absolutely not afraid to answer the door. So the next time someone knocks with arrogance and entitlement, remember what you see at the surface might not be the full picture. Sometimes, the person you're trying to bully is the one with the badge. Asterisk. Karen didn't vanish, of course. People like her rarely do. For weeks after the incident, she kept her distance, but you could feel her eyes watching from behind the curtains. Every time Emily and I stepped outside, every time neighbors gathered on a lawn or sidewalk, that same thin sliver of curtain would shift, just barely. She was still trying to hold on to the scraps of power she had left, but the neighborhood had changed. People who'd once tiptoed around her started pushing back. The Smiths across the street finally put up the tree swing their kids had begged for. The Rodriguezes repainted their porch railings, bright blue Corinne's least favorite color. No one flinched anymore when she muttered about violations. They just smiled and waved. The monthly HOA meetings used to be empty and tense. Now they were full and lively. Emily didn't take over the HOI. She didn't want to. But she helped elect a new president, a calm and level-headed woman named Beth, who actually listened to people. Suddenly, meetings weren't about citations or threats. They were about improvements, cooperation, and actual community goals. And Karen, well, she showed up to the first meeting after her disciplinary review. Quiet, alone. She sat in the back, arms crossed, her mouth a tight line. Beth opened the floor for discussion, and one by one, neighbors spoke not in anger, but in honesty. Mr. Green, the elderly man who'd once been fined for not pulling his trash cans in before 7 a.m., stood up and said, "I was afraid to speak up before, but now I feel like this is a place I can live in peace." A few people clapped. Others nodded. Karen didn't say a word that night. She just left quietly halfway through. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Emily found a letter in our mailbox. No envelope, just a folded piece of stationery with neat handwriting. "I didn't know who you were, but now I do. Still don't agree with how everything happened, but I see why people trust you. I was trying to keep things in order, but maybe I was just trying to stay in control. Maybe too much, Karen." It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't tell anyone about the note, not even me at first. She just tucked it into a drawer and went on with her day. And that's the thing about real leadership. It doesn't scream. It doesn't power trip. It doesn't need to win every argument. It stands tall, quietly, and lets the truth settle in. The neighborhood grew closer after that. Summer block parties returned. Kids sold lemonade without a permit, and no one cared. Even Karen began to soften. She started showing up to events at first with that same disapproving frown, but eventually with a casserole and a smile, even if it was a small one. One afternoon, while Emily and I were out walking, Karen passed us on the sidewalk. We exchanged nods. Then she paused. "You know," Karen said, "you could have humiliated me publicly, but you didn't." Emily shrugged. "That's not my style." Karen gave a short chuckle. "No, I suppose it's not." And just like that, she walked. On people talk a lot about justice, about taking down bullies, about revenge. But sometimes the best justice isn't loud or brutal. Sometimes it's a simple truth, revealed at the right moment. Karen learned the hard way that you don't get to control people through fear, not when someone like Emily stands in your way. And the rest of us always means shouting. Sometimes it means not answering the door and letting your presence do the talking. So when the HOA calls, when the Karens of the world start knocking, ask yourself, do they really know who they're dealing with? Because sometimes the person behind that door isn't just your neighbor. She's the one rewriting the rules. Months passed. The air in the neighborhood felt different, lighter, easier to breathe. It was almost hard to believe that, not long ago, the community had lived in fear of one woman's clipboard and her endless citations. But healing takes time. Emily didn't speak much about that day, the day Karen called the cops on her for simply not answering the door. She didn't need to. The community remembered, not out of resentment, but as a quiet reminder of how icily power can twist things when left unchecked. Then something else happened. A new family moved in down the block, young couple, 2 small kids and a German shepherd named Duke. They were excited, friendly, the kind who waved at every passing car and brought cookies to their closest neighbors. Within 2 weeks, Karen had left a typed note on their door. It said, "Your dog barked for a total of 16 minutes yesterday afternoon. That exceeds the neighborhood noise limit. Consider this a warning." The note was unsigned, but everyone knew. The couple was confused, even a little shaken. They showed up at the next HOA meeting with the note in hand, unsure what to do. Before Beth could even respond, Karen stood up. Everyone turned, surprised. "That note was from me," Karen said flatly, "and I'd like to retract it." There was silence. "I used to think order was more important than peace," she continued, "that if I controlled the details, everything would run better. But it didn't. It just made me angry and made you all resent me. Emily watched her closely, her expression unreadable. Karen went on. This neighborhood gave me a second chance. Emily Maddox showed me what restraint looks like, what actual leadership looks like. I didn't thank her for that, but I am now. And then she did something none of us expected. She sat down, no applause, no grandstanding, just quiet acceptance. That night, Emily and I walked home side by side under the orange glow of the street lamps. I turned to her. You think she really changed? Emily took a deep breath. I think she's trying, and sometimes that's enough. We reached our porch, the same porch Karen once pointed at with scorn, now just another part of our peaceful little corner of the world. As we stepped inside, I glanced at Emily and said, You didn't just change the rules, you changed the tone. She smiled. People follow examples more than orders. And that's the truth of it. Power doesn't always come with a title. It doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a badge. Sometimes power is quiet. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's a woman standing calmly in her doorway. Refusing to give ignorance the time of day, Emily didn't win with force. She didn't fight with anger. She just stood firm. And in doing so, she reminded an entire neighborhood that real authority doesn't knock loud, it knocks with purpose. A. Few more seasons passed. The trees along our block turned gold and red, then bare, then green again. Life moved on, as it always does, but something in our neighborhood remained permanently changed, not in some dramatic storybook way, but in the quieter moments, like when old Mr. Jensen, the retired Navy vet who used to hide inside during HOA patrol hours, started planting tomatoes in his front yard, the very spot Karen once told him wasn't aesthetic, or when kids rode their bikes down the sidewalk, with chalk trails behind them, and no one threatened to call code enforcement for vandalism. Peace had taken root where fear once grew. But this peace was tested again by someone new. His name was Martin. Late 40s, expensive car, sharp suits, perfect lawn. He moved into one of the larger corner houses and joined the HOA board within. A month said he wanted to bring things back to standards. It wasn't long before the memos started appearing, again different font, different name, same tone. Excessive yard decor. Basketball hoop must be stored after use. Driveway. Oil stains are subject to fines. It was like déjà vu. Only this time, the neighborhood wasn't scared, because now they had a blueprint for how to stand tall. Beth, the HOA president, called an emergency meeting after Martin sent out a formal citation to a single mother for hanging laundry outside. The room was packed. Again, Martin sat at the head of the table like he owned it. I'm simply enforcing the bylaws, he said with a smirk. Order doesn't maintain itself. Before anyone could respond, a chair scraped at the back of the room. Emily stood. She didn't say anything right away, just walked slowly to the front end, turned to face everyone. The same calm confidence, the same firm posture. She was off duty, wearing jeans and a gray sweater, but her presence alone felt like a badge. You're not wrong about rules. Martin, she began, but you're wrong about why they exist. He looked up at her, eyebrows raised. They exist to support a community, not to suppress it. When rules stop serving the people they were designed for, they become weapons, not tools. There was silence. Emily turned to the crowd. We've already seen what happens when someone abuses these roles. We know better now. We've already lived through that. Karen was sitting near the middle. She didn't flinch, just nodded once. A small but undeniable gesture of alliance. Then a hand went up. It was the young mother who got the citation. I hang my laundry because I can't afford a dryer. I thought that made me less than my neighbors, but now I think it just makes me human. Beth stepped forward. We're not going backward, she said firmly. We're voting tonight to revise the enforcement policy, and anyone who continues weaponizing the rules, whether they're new or old, will be removed from the board. The vote passed overwhelmingly. Martin stood up, looking around as if expecting someone to back him up. No one did. He left that night and never returned to another meeting. Later, I asked Emily if she was proud of what she did. She smiled faintly. I didn't do anything. They just needed someone to go first. That's the quiet brilliance of real leadership, not the spotlight, not the title. Just consistency, integrity, and showing up over and over again until. The message is clear. Our story didn't end with a big blow-up or a dramatic showdown. It ended the way real change does, slowly, steadily, and through the example of someone who refused to let fear shape her neighborhood. And now, when the doorbell rings and the kids ride freely and neighbors talk over fences instead of reporting each other, we all know why. Because one woman answered with calm, with strength, and without ever raising her voice, she rewrote the future of our entire block. And if that's not power, I don't know what is. Blooming across front yards or the gentle breeze moving wind chimes. But in the spirit of the neighborhood itself, what was once a tightly wound, rule-dominated community had grown into something more open, more human, and undeniably more united. And at the center of that quiet revolution stood Emily. She never wanted to be a symbol. She never sought recognition. But people started seeing her that way anyway. Not as a hero in the dramatic sense, but as the neighbor who reminded everyone that strength isn't loud. Justice isn't always flashy, and real change doesn't need a gavel or a badge to begin it. Needs someone brave enough to not flinch. When pressured done, came the day the city announced it would be hosting its annual Civic Pride Awards. Who had impacted their local communities in meaningful ways. Names were submitted anonymously, and to Emily's complete surprise, hers had made the shortlist. I remember. The night she found out, she was in the backyard watering her herbs. I handed her the letter. She opened it, read it, and quietly said, "I didn't think anyone noticed." I smiled. "They noticed, Em. You just weren't looking for the applause." Weeks later, we sat in a crowded auditorium downtown. The mayor took the stage and began reading aloud the finalist stories. This year's recipient stood against intimidation, not with defiance, but with quiet strength. She taught her neighborhood that authority without compassion becomes oppression, and that true leadership often begins at home. He paused. For transforming an entire community, not through enforcement, but through empathy, we honor Chief Emily Maddox. She didn't stand right away. She looked stunned, almost embarrassed. I gently nudged her. The whole room stood as she approached the podium. No long speech, just a few words. I didn't do this alone. I just did what anyone should do when they see something wrong: speak up, stay calm, and believe that people can be better. The applause said the rest. When we got home that night, something simple but beautiful happened. Karen was waiting on our porch, not to argue, not to scold, but to hand Emily something wrapped in brown paper. "I found this in a shop downtown," Karen said softly. "Figured it belonged with someone who actually earned it." Emily opened it tinside, was a hand-carved wooden plaque. It read, "Respect is quiet, but unforgettable." Karen smiled awkwardly, then turned to leave. "Hey," Emily called after her, "join us for dinner next week." "Just neighbors." Karen hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." That small moment, that fragile human offering of peace, was the real ending, not the award, not the speech, but the fact that even those who once opposed change could become part of it. And so the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. Still imperfect, still growing, but finally a place where doors opened to more than just inspections and citations. Now when kids draw with sidewalk chalk, they sign their names in giant, colorful letters. Now when neighbors plant gardens, they share tomatoes over the fence. And when the doorbell rings, it's not fear or suspicion anymore. It's usually just a hello, because one day someone knocked and was met not with fear, not with submission, but with quiet strength. And that changed everything. That's how a community is built, not by rules, but by people brave enough to make space for everyone. Asterisk. And if this story moved you even just a little, remember, these aren't just tales. They're reflections of real people, real neighborhoods, and real change that starts with standing up calmly and confidently. So if you want more powerful, emotional stories like this, where everyday heroes rewrite the rules and remind us what real strength looks like, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps bring these stories to life. And who knows, the next one might just be about you.